Welcome in to the New Orleans Pelicans Podcast, the official podcast of your New Orleans Pelicans. A podcast dedicated to everything you need to know about the squad. Hear from players, coaches, broadcasters, and those who cover the NBA on a daily basis. It's time to flock up. The New Orleans Pelicans Podcast starts right now.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the New Orleans Pelicans Podcast, official podcast of your New Orleans Pelicans. It is Monday, February 24th. Hard to believe, Mr. Jim Eichenhofer for Pelicans.com. Hard to believe, Mr. Jim Eichenhofer for Pelicans.com, that we are almost out of the month of February. We're off and running now in the final 25 games after 2 games have been played post All-Star break over the weekend. How are you today?
I'm good, Gus. You know, I thought it was a pretty interesting weekend. I mean, the Pelicans played really competitively against Dallas, even though that was a loss. And then obviously Sunday was a really excellent performance to be able to come back from down 17 and then win the game by 18. So it was some pretty good basketball. A good start, I think, to the post All-Star break of the schedule.
Yeah, no doubt. Back on Friday, the Pelicans at Dallas, and this is what it sounded like on the Pelicans radio network.
Back the other way, Alvarado to CJ. Fake a three, take a three, make a three from the right wing. And third quarter, Z, right elbow. Drives on Washington. Lays it in with contact.
And he should have been at the foul line. Just eat, big fella.
Get it out long, Z. Head of steam. Fouled. No call. Floats it up and in anyway from the restricted arc.
Zion has all 10 points this quarter for New Orleans.
Makovich down the lane.
Oh, yes, sir.
Throws it
my
down.
Gosh, he came down on the back of his head.
Back iron. Rebound, Jose. Outfought Najee. Floats it up and in with a right hand as it rattles down. How about Alvarado?
Oh, he's gonna talk about that one.
Chests it over to McCollum. Drives on Najee Marshall. Spins right, restricted arc. Lays it up, no. Tipped up and in by Yves Missi. That was Missi's 10th rebound, by the way.
And he finally able to get something to fall.
3-ball Kyrie. You know that's going on.
He's just sloppy.
Come on. Back the other way. Christie right baseline. Leave it for Najee. Left-hand dribble. One-on-one with Jose. Elbowed him in the chops and lays it in. Yeah, and he just little man Jose.
8-0.
Oh, they're brothers from another mother.
8-0 Mavs run, and then gave him the too small.
How dare you, Najee?
So that was on Friday, 111-103 was the final. And then last night, the Pels coming back home for the first of 2 against the San Antonio Spurs. This is what it sounded like on the Pelicans radio network.
And Olynyk another rebound, his 3rd offensive board. Goes behind the back to McCollum streaking down the lane, who scoops it to Z and a dunk. Are you serious, Kelly Olynyk?
Kelly.
Now McCollum kick it out to Olynyk. Right angle 3. Hello, Kelly Olynyk.
Kelly's heroes up in here.
One of the all-time greats when you're talking about 6'10 or bigger shooting threes. CJ front court. Left-hand dribble. Kick it out to Olynyk. Back to CJ up top.
Give it to Z before he goes out.
Now Z left elbow. Get it to Murphy in the lane. Rears back and hammers her down with 2 hands.
When has the weak side cut not been a great basketball play?
So Pels up 13-5. Good start. Drives to the right block, puts up the mid-range. Air ball, drops in Olynyk's lap, and that is Kelly Olynyk's first Pelican double-double. 10 points, 10 rebounds. Should have walked, didn't call it, threw it right to Z. Now you got a break. Carlo to Trey! Throw it down on the dunk. Willie Green says, get back on defense, and we do.
From the heavens, Trey drifts down.
And then Champagny beats it and misses a layup. Rebound Alvarado. Trey leaked out again. Layup good!
That's beautiful basketball. That is the small flurry that the Pels need. Maybe this gives them the momentum.
As a matter of fact, everybody's in the backcourt. Inbound to Z. Z with 4, crosses the timeline. Right-hand dribble. Lob it up to Carlo!
Oh, yes, sir, Z!
With 1/10 of a second left, what a pass and finish by Makovich. Wow, a pass from Williamson. That happened in 5 seconds. Dish to Johnson, fly by Z, 3-ball on the way, around and out, rebound Alvarado. Can tie with a 3. Up the floor, Hawkins. Stop, pop 3 from Jose, and down for
Hawkeye.
Jose trying to repose Z.
Oh, you got it.
Got him on the block, takes it to Johnson. Lays it in and one.
You got it. That's a grown man against Keldon Johnson. Keldon Johnson nobody can, but he just has not been making the shots. Look at him getting this Keldon Johnson's chest and treat him like he's his little brother.
Shovel to McCollum. Chest it to Trey. Fake a three. Drive to the box. Get it to Carlo. Scooping layup. Got it with a little English.
Carlo showing out.
Career high now, 15 points for Makovich. No hurry now.
No hurry at all.
No, Trey. He'll take it anyway. Up! Shut up, Graf! Shut your trap!
Trey be in.
3 ball. Lights out.
He needed that.
Yep. McCollum in the backcourt. Get it to Trey. Trey, look at Carlo. Don't get down. Great pass, Murphy. Makovich with the flush. And the final timeout taken by San Antonio. What a night for Makovich.
Makovich playing his Makovich off.
Well said, John DeShazer. 114-96, the final over the Spurs in game 1 of 2. We'll see him again tomorrow. Look, what a difference of 2 halves Jim Eichenhofer, first and second half.
Yeah, I mean, the Spurs were up by 13 at halftime, and it was looking bleak. I was sitting there thinking, man, the Spurs don't have Wembanyama, and you're still not going to be able to beat these guys. But what a turnaround in the second half. Pelicans won that 74-43. I thought, you've heard me harp on this a little bit over the last few weeks, that the defense for the Pelicans has to get a lot better. And I think that was a huge key in the second half, but also the game overall. I mean, they gave up 43 points after halftime, which is great. But one of the things I thought was interesting about Sunday's game was, if you look at the Spurs, I guess what we'd say their main perimeter guys in their starting lineup, between Chris Paul, De'Aaron Fox, and Devin Vassell, they shot 5 for 35 from the field as a trio. I mean, that is some really good. I don't know how much of that. I know Jose Alvarado talked about this a little bit after the game. How much of that is the Pelicans' defense? How much of that is those guys just had off nights? But I mean, and I'm sure you're not expecting them to shoot that way in the rematch on Tuesday. But that was a huge plus, the fact that they were able to hold those guys down and to very limited offensive games. And then on the other side, I mean, the Pelicans, it wasn't as bad of a night for C.J. McCollum and Trey Murphy as it was for those 3 Spurs guys that I mentioned, but C.J. and Trey combined to shoot 10 for 27 from the field, so that was way below what we're used to seeing from them. They were also only 5 for 16 on threes. Those 2 guys did combine for 12 assists, but if you think about it, really, the difference in the game was both teams had, as I mentioned, perimeter guys that struggled and didn't shoot well, but the rest of the roster, the rest of the rotation for the Pelicans was so many guys that played well last night, whether it was off the bench, that Carlo Makovich was very heavily involved in those highlights that you just played, or Jose Alvarado did some great stuff. Jordan Hawkins had 10 points off the bench as well. Kelly Olynyk had a double-double. Yves Missi had his career high in rebounds. Zion did pretty much what he usually does. He was a little bit less efficient at the crazy high standard that he's set for himself lately. He's 8 for 17 from the field, but had 22 points. But, I mean, it was really, Willie Green talked about this too after the game. It was such a team-wide performance. It was the depth and the number of different guys that contributed for the Pelicans was a reason that they were able to turn what was a 17-point deficit into the 18-point win that they got.
Yeah, no doubt. Here's Coach.
We talked about it at halftime, cutting down on the turnovers offensively. We can still do a better job, but I think the first half we had 11 and only 6 in the second half, so we did a better job there. Making sure we understand defensively this is a multiple effort game. They do a great job of drive and kick, so stay with it. Let's try to get some easy baskets in transition when we get stops, and the guys came out in the second half and they really focused on those details.
I think one of the things, too, that stood out, again, and Jim, we talked about it in postgame last night, Zion Williamson, again, just very efficient in the minutes in which he was playing in, 22 points in 28 minutes, 9 rebounds, 3 assists. I thought it was interesting. Hear what he has to say, and then what Coach has to say about what we're starting to see, and it's something that you specifically said we need to focus on here in the last 27 post-All-Star break.
There's less turnovers and getting out in transition. First half, I think we had 0 transition points. And second half, I think we had 17 or 19. So that definitely helped a lot. But I got to give a lot of the credit to Jose. Jose was a vocal leader tonight, and his energy really shifted the course of the game.
So, again, one of the things he's very comfortable in is something you've brought up before. He loves to talk about his teammates and give credit to what Jose did. And Coach said he needed his spirit and energy as well. But I thought Coach saying this specifically about this team learning to play with him at the point.
Yeah, they understand his gravity allows for our offense to be successful. So when he touches the ball, he's either scoring or he's creating open looks for everybody. He's getting to the free throw line. So we'll continue to work on our spacing when he has the ball. But I thought Carlo did a great job. Eve did a great job. KO, when he has it, those guys get to space automatically. And Zizi, the scorer, he's finding his teammates for easy looks.
I thought Jose and Zion, again, had a couple really good connections. There was a play that was just beautiful basketball where they did kind of a give and go. He passed it to Zion. Zion passed it back to Jose. Jose cut into the lane. He drew a defender or two over to him, and then he just quickly dished it back to Zion for a layup. And Jose talked about that after the game Sunday too, that he's played with Zion for 4 years now and just gotten to the point where they understand where each other are going to be on the court, and just the experience of being together has helped a lot. So I thought we're seeing that with a bunch of different guys, as Willie Green mentioned, but also in an extremely quick fashion, we're seeing that with Kelly Olynyk as well, who I guess we're going to call Kelly O from this point forward. That's what everybody has started calling, or KO. That works as well.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, I think that they just a lot of good signs last night, a lot of positives from across the board, and Zion continues to play extremely well. I'm going to talk about him a little bit more later in the show in terms of what he's been doing lately. But once again, 22 points in 28 minutes. That's actually a little bit less than his rate. We're used to him getting a point per minute, but
yeah.
We'll let that slide though, because they won the game.
Well, I think part of the reason too is because other guys were scoring, and
Sure.
Again, look, you had career nights in rebounds from EC, career night in points for Carlo Makovic, and look, those are a lot of the things we want to see, right? Let's just be honest. Moving forward, I know the playoffs are out of reach, but it's what are these players' roles going to be next season? The development of these young players, doing those things. And I think the best case scenario, Jim, is developing players, playing players, giving them minutes at the same time winning. Does that make sense? I mean, obviously,
Sure.
A lot of times, I know you've talked about it. At what point does Coach Willie Green start focusing on development and playing these players? Well, these guys are getting minutes, but they're also helping win.
Yeah, I mean, I think if there's any silver lining to being in the position that the Pelicans are in right now, where they're 14-43 with 25 games left, is that you can really go into almost complete evaluation mode over the last couple months of the season. I mean, this hasn't really been the case here in a long time. I mean, for the vast majority of the years I've been here, the team has either been in the playoffs or been in the playoff race going into the last couple weeks of the season. Maybe there's a few years where, say, with 5-6 games left in the season, it was like they're either eliminated now or they're about to be eliminated. So you might have had a week or so where, you're out of the race. But, I mean, in this case, I think you can definitely just turn your attention so much more to next season and not be as focused on the short-term goals of that we have to win this game because we need to make the play-in tournament or we need to improve our seeding in the Western Conference, whatever the case may be. So yeah, I mean, that is something that they can definitely do, is just go to figuring out, a bunch of these guys, how much of a role are some of these players going to have next season. Zion talked about this last night too. I mean, there's actually a lot of interesting comments, I thought, in the post game. We've played some of them, but if you go to Pelicans.com, you can listen and watch a lot of the press conferences. But he talked about how one of his goals for the last 20 plus games of the season for the team is to just be able to put together some good stretches and be able to go into next season building upon whatever they did in February, March, and April, as opposed to, you just played out the season, you didn't really learn anything. So I think that's definitely important for a lot of individual players of, how much of a role are some of these guys going to have and how big of a part of the future are they going to be. Obviously, we're going to head into the offseason here where you're going to have a draft where your pick in the first round is most likely going to be somebody that is going to have a huge role. So that's going to, crowd out some other guys as far as their ability to contribute in the offseason. Who knows what's going to happen. But yeah, this is an important stretch for a lot of these players as far as, how much of a future do they have with the Pelicans.
Yeah, I think it's one of the things that's going to be interesting now. 25 games remaining. Jim, I know one of the things that you wanted to touch on, too, was some of the bigs and what some of the things that Zion specifically is doing. So where would you like to start?
Let's start with Kelly Olynyk.
Okay.
I think one of the stats, he's only played 2 games, but it feels like way more than that. I don't know if it's because he's already done about 5 or 6 interviews where, right after they traded for him, we sat down with him and did a podcast interview with him. He's done a couple. I think he spoke after practice on Saturday. He spoke after the game last night. So hopefully soon he will get to the point where he will have played in as many games as interviews he's done. But he's made a really nice impact so far.
He was asked how comfy he is now in the whole weekend's worth of time.
Yeah, it was night and day. Obviously, Friday I had like half a practice basically and played a game. So just starting to get more comfortable, feel it out. Obviously, learn the system. When they call a play, actually knowing what the play is. All that helps and contributes.
That's pretty good. All it took is 2 games to learn some plays and get a double-double.
And even with his head spinning apparently in Friday's game, the Pelicans still won his minutes by 11 in that game against Dallas, and then they won his minutes against the Spurs by 21. So 2 games in a Pelicans uniform, he's a plus 32 in the time that he's been on the court, even though his minutes have been relatively modest. I think he played 24 Friday, and then he played 25 on Sunday. So
and 14 and 15 in those 25 minutes.
Right.
That's a really good stat line.
I'm not sure whether it was because he had that Friday game under his belt, but Sunday too, he also immediately started making an impact. He had that really nice behind the back pass that I think he played in the highlights earlier. He had a bunch of rebounds in the first few minutes, a couple baskets, a couple offensive rebounds that he scored on. Pelicans are plus 32 with him in the minutes that he's played over these 2 games and minus 22 when he's not on the court. So, just right there shows you that he's definitely made a difference. And it seems like Zion and some of the other players have already noted just how much basketball IQ he has, how easy it is to play with him. He's also a very good passer, so that helps a lot as well.
All right, Jim, and speaking of Kelly's impact, look, Zion Williamson last night after the game had this to say about the early fit with him.
And it seems like, very early on in these first 2 games that you and Kelly have been able to click on the court. What do you think y'all have been able to kind of mesh as well as y'all have?
Man, I just told him he got vision. He sees the floor, he sees the game to where there are times where I might not be aware of certain things and he'll just kind of play off me, or I'll see he's doing something and kind of relocate to a different spot just because I trust his vision and also trust it. He knows when to exploit a mismatch.
Yeah, we've seen the connection. It's not like I feel like you and I could go out on the court and throw Zion an alley-oop,
yeah.
But Olynyk, the game against Dallas on Friday, he threw one from half court to Zion, even though obviously by Kelly's own words, he has hardly had any time to get on the practice court. So, he just has like that veteran savvy and the understanding of the game. He always has his head up. That's one thing I always notice is about really good passers. He's always scanning the floor, so he always knows when guys are going to be open or when they are open. So, yeah, that's definitely a real nice positive, the fact that already Zion is recognizing, the kind of fit that Kelly can be with him, and something that we really wanted to see over the last 20-something games of the season that wasn't expecting it to be, as Will Guillory, who asked that question, wasn't expecting it to mesh maybe this fast, but it's great the fact that it didn't even take them 2 games to get to the point where they're playing off of each other so well. So, we also saw, I think we saw Carlo throw an alley-oop to Trey Murphy last night. Mm-hmm. We saw somebody, I can't remember now, someone threw Carlo an alley-oop, so we're getting a lot of those highlight reel plays right now.
You know how I feel. I love playing above the rim.
You love the dunks.
Oh, well, look, it brings the energy level up.
Sure.
Back to Kelly being able to play with Zion, I don't think it's a coincidence, right? Even with Bruce Brown, and we saw him make a key kind of drive down the baseline there to kind of, get things going there on the offensive end too. The stat line doesn't show you that kind of impact, but there's that one play when there was momentum and the Pels were on a big run that continued right at the buzzer of the shot clock. But Kelly and Bruce, right? They've played with stars, like big stars.
Mm-hmm.
And his time with Boston, I don't know if you can get a bigger star, duo than
Right.
Tatum and Brown and things. So I think that's a player that's used to understanding, hey, we got some special athletes on the court. Look for the pass.
Sure.
Get the board. Get into their hands. Like, that's a player that has that understanding of, like we all see, when number one is on the court, get it in his hands. Let him decide the dish. Let him decide the score. Just get it in his hands. And I saw that yesterday, getting those boards, those rebounds. Jim, 69 rebounds. I know Willie Green said, head coach of your Pels, said it was an effort and the game plan to go do that. But it's really that simple. Crash the boards, get out and run.
Yeah, I think that might have been, I'd have to go back and look, but that might have been the best rebounding margin that the Pelicans have had this season.
It is,
I mean, not
and
only,
it's the third overall, the most.
Okay, yeah. Third most overall in team history, I think, right?
Yeah.
As far as the number of boards. Yeah, I mean, I think that high number of rebounds is impressive and really jumps off the page, but the fact that the Spurs only had 46 definitely is huge. I mean, you don't see too often where you have two guys in the starting lineup get 15 rebounds. Jose Alvarado actually had 9 off the bench too, which was his career high as well. He talked about just tracking down some longer misses, which the Spurs had a bunch of those with how poorly they shot. And then our guy Carlo Makovic had 6 rebounds as well, career high in scoring for him. So I mean, just across the board, it was a tremendous performance by the Pelicans front court. And even though, like I said, Trey and CJ had rough shooting games, I mean, I think there were so many other guys that were able to pick up the slack, and especially the centers and the forwards for the Pelicans had really good nights.
What else would you like to touch on about some of those bigs?
Yeah, I mean, Carlo Makovic, let's talk about him if we could briefly. Over his last 3 games, he's averaging 13.7 points, 5.3 rebounds, and doing it he's not having any nights where he's playing 35 minutes. He's doing a lot in a relatively modest amount of time. I mean, he's another thing that stood out to me about him defensively. He's had 10 games in a row where he's had at least 1 block. And again, when you look at the minutes that he's played, he had a game against Sacramento where he only played 14 minutes. He had a game at Sacramento where he only played 17. A game against Boston where he played 18 minutes. He still had a block in all of those games. So, I mean, just the fact that he's been able to do that as a guy coming off the bench is pretty rare. So I'm impressed by the way he's been playing. I think it's good to see. You're probably going to get a chance to talk to him a little bit more this week. But it's been good to see him be able to take advantage of the opportunity that he's had. I know he spent part of the season in Birmingham in the G League and did really well. I mean, he was very productive in the games that he played there, to the point where I'm not saying that he was, just completely obliterating the G League, but I do think that it got to the point where it was like, I don't know how much more that he can really show at that level. It was the kind of thing where it's like he has to do it against NBA players. I'm not sure you're going to be able to glean too much more information about him playing, in the lower level with Birmingham. But I mean, the fact that he's been able to capitalize the way he has, I mean, he had 13 points against the Kings in the game right before the All-Star break, had 9 against Dallas on Friday, and then 19 career high Sunday against the Spurs. So he's really showing at both ends of the court, and his rebounding numbers have been pretty good as well for the most part. Just showing that he can handle those backup minutes and be a really important part of the 2 most recent wins that they had, the last 2 home games against the Kings and the Spurs. I think he was a huge factor in both of those games. Probably games that the Pelicans, I think they won comfortably against the Spurs, but I don't think they would have beaten the Kings without Carlos. So, I mean, he's been really valuable in the last few games he's played.
That's what he had to say on his nights?
I just think being in my spots, executing when I get the ball, and basically that's it. Teammates find me when I was open. I had some easy ones. So, basically running my stuff, doing my thing, basically what I have to do, and then just finishing it.
I thought John DeShazer said it best towards the end of the ball game last night about Carlos specifically. He was coming out of a timeout, Jim, and he was talking to Graf about he seemed lost in his early minutes this season as to his fit and where to go. And right now he's starting to look like an NBA player. Sure. And I think that's kind of what you're saying there too, right? It's so hard to develop and become a rotational player, become an NBA player if you don't play. I mean, it just,
Right.
you have to have the minutes out there. And look, you've talked about it too, the difficulty as to why. I mean, there are very real reasons why this team has now, they're 14 wins on the season. And it's hard to get any kind of continuity, know where anybody's going and how anybody's playing if you don't play together with all the different lineups you've had and all those different aspects of it. It just makes it hard, right? I mean, that's why we saw turnovers this season where the DeJounte Murray, who's a pretty good passer, he's a professional point guard, throws it at the feet of Trey Murphy. And Wes Johnson sat here and said, well, it's because he doesn't know if he's going left, if he's going right, that nature. So I think Carlo is one of those players, just like a lot of these other players here in the final 25 games. These minutes are valuable. I mean, I know it's not for playoff contention or playoff seeding, but to Zion's point that you just said, finishing a certain way and using that into next year, so there isn't that learning process in October next year.
Yeah, for
Does
sure.
that make sense?
Yeah, you want to start further ahead in the end of October this year when the regular season starts from where you are now. You don't want to have to go back to square one in a lot of ways. So, yeah, I mean, what you said about John DeShazer's comments about Carlo, I mean, I agree 100%. I think it's interesting, too, that if you look back at it, a lot of the games that Carlo did play in the first few months of the season, it was 3 or 4 minutes in a game where it was one-sided. The Pelicans were either up 20, 30 or more often down 20, 30 points. And so, I mean, even if he was playing in competitive games, if you're only playing 3 to 5 minutes, it's hard to really get any momentum going, and you are going to look a lot out of sorts. I mean, a lot of those nights, if you think about it in real time, you're sitting on the bench for 2 hours, and then all of a sudden you haven't done anything all night, and now you got to go in at the end of the game and play a few minutes. So, I mean, it's really hard to gain much traction as a player individually. I mean, I honestly don't think that I was just kind of scrolling through his game logs right now. He did not think about this. He did not play in any game that was decided by less than 10 points until January 20th against Utah, where he played 15 minutes in the game on Martin Luther King that the Pelicans, I think that was an overtime win against the Jazz. So, I mean, he's only been on the court in games where it's not, decided, it's not garbage time, mop-up time for about a month. So now we're starting to see the benefits, and he's in the rewards of him just being in the rotation constantly, him being out there night in and night out, and him producing the way he does. I mean, I almost feel like the first few months of the season, yeah, he did look out of sorts at times, but it's just really hard to glean a whole lot of important or relevant information from the opportunities that he got because they were so much fourth quarter, you're down by 25 points.
It'll be interesting to see as we continue on. The more the minutes, the more he'll be able to do. And Jim, we talked about Kelly Olynyk. Nice night, double-double for the Pels. We just mentioned Carlo Makovich, career high for him in points. And then here's Yves Missi. 2 buckets, Jim. He needed 2 buckets, 4 points. He would have had a double-double here, but career high in rebounds for him, man. He hit that little wall a little bit because he's played the most games he's ever played. Yep. How important is it the way that you're seeing him rebound, man, and show something here?
Yeah, I mean, he had, over the weekend, the Friday game against Dallas, he had 10 rebounds. Against the Spurs, he had 15. And, I mean, just as importantly, the Mavs game, he had 5 offensive rebounds. Spurs, he had 6. So he's really doing damage at both ends of the floor rebounding-wise. So, I mean, in general, I think it's nice that there are so many positive things that happened on the weekend, and more specifically in Sunday's game, that Yves Missi career high with 15 rebounds is kind of more of like an oh by the way, like oh this also happened. It wasn't. I mean, there's been a lot of times throughout this season where that would have been our number one thing that we went right to because there wasn't a whole lot of other stuff that was encouraging or positive to talk about. So yeah, I mean the fact that he's been hitting the boards really hard, and I mean his minutes have actually gone down a little bit. I think maybe a little bit because his production has dropped off a little bit as he, like you said, he hit the rookie wall. He had a stretch where he wasn't playing as well, but also the fact that some of these other big guys have been excelling. He played 24 minutes against Dallas, and then he only played 23 against the Spurs, so he's not even playing half the game, and he's getting these kind of rebounding numbers, so I think that's a really positive sign as well.
The other thing, too, is almost forgotten. The last time he was on the court before the All-Star break, he got injured. He didn't get to play in the Rising Stars game. And so you didn't know. I mean, it's not like they had a whole week and a half. I mean, it was a couple of days for him to rest up, but we didn't know if he was going to play on Friday in Dallas, and he does.
And he was still questionable, I think, listed the day before on the injury report.
Is that one of the things that you're going to remember? And I know we got some time. We got 25 more games to go. And at the end of the year, we'll do kind of a recap. And I know you like to go by player like we did at the end of last year. But I'm already going to preview a portion of the Eve Meese episode. I think one of the things that's been a real big standout, aside from, hey, no one expect him to contribute like this guy has played through things. I can close my eyes, and I'm not very good specific-wise, but he's got nicked up, and he's still in the game. He'll go to the locker room, he'll come back and play in the game. Very rarely can I think, Jim, of him missing games due to injury. And again, that's why I bring this up. There was something with his knee that happened. And then he comes back right at the All-Star break and has 2 double-digit rebounding games. I think on a team and on a franchise where injuries have been a concern, that's got to make me feel good if I'm Willie Green, David Griffin, and everybody else. That here's a young kid that plays a lot around the rim, plays above the rim, his athleticism, his speed, and he's showing the ability to be able to play through bumps and bruises. Does that make sense?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I'll give you some numbers. He's played in 54 of the 57 games for the Pelicans this season. So yeah, he's only missed 3 games.
That's incredible.
He missed the 2 Utah home games. Those games in mid-January, right before the huge snowstorm. He missed those, and then he missed 1 in November, right before Thanksgiving against Golden State. But other than that, he's been on the court every single game. So I mean, yeah, it's pretty rare too. I think that you see a rookie lead your team in games played, but he's also done that as well. So. And I mean, honestly, this is a season where they needed that. They needed as many guys as possible to play as many games as they could. So, I mean, that part of it is probably should not go unnoticed or unrecognized, the fact that he has been extremely durable in playing the 54 games. I mean, second on the Pelicans in games played is Javonte Green with 50, who obviously is with the Cleveland Cavaliers now. And then Jeremiah Robinson-Earl is third with 45, CJ McCollum 43. So, I mean, it's a pretty big gap, even in terms of the guys that are still here. The 54 games that Eve's played, and then JRE at 45. There's a pretty big margin between even that, the first and second place guys on that list. So yeah, it's been important. I mean, I think he's had a really good rookie year, and you know, he's going to find his second wind and keep producing the way he has over the weekend.
And it's something that I remember C.J. McCollum saying earlier this season, too, of, you know, helping, giving him advice as to how to take care of you. But he has no idea. I mean, and again, to, you know, James Borrego's point when he sat down and chatted with you guys, too, and on Pelicans Weekly, nobody expected him to be needed or depended on this much. And it's been a pleasant surprise jumping right into the starting lineup after a week into the season where they're like, hey, this guy can help us and doing that. So you can just imagine an offseason, understanding what it takes. I'm excited about him next year.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things I think you have to think about, too, is when you look at rookies is, I mentioned the 54 games that he played. I mean, in college he played 34. So, I mean, he's already played 20 more games this season than he did at Baylor. And, I mean, you're talking, you know, the college season is spread out to the point where you play like 2 games a week.
Yeah.
He's playing 4, sometimes maybe 5 games in 7 days. And so that part of it has been huge. I don't think realistically he's in the Rookie of the Year race anymore, but it would be good to see him get, you know, maybe first team or second team somewhere on the all rookie team spots. I think he probably has a great chance to do that because I think most people still list him, you know, maybe in the top 6 or so as far as the NBA.com rookie ladder and some of those other rankings.
Look, I love this as we sit here on this Monday, the fact that we had so many positive things, not us trying to create positive things after a 30-point defeat. It's legit. I mean, there's a reason the Pels won yesterday, and it was the people that we talked about, and there were very real contributions from some of the young players, including a new Pelican and Kelly Olynyk, so it's not bad.
Yeah, I mean, I hope that when we get to mid-April and the regular season wraps up and we're going into off-season mode, that we can look back at this and say, you know, the Pelicans made some good strides at the end of the season. The trade that they made yielded, you know, something really helpful that they can build upon with Kelly Olynyk, and then Bruce Brown. You know, obviously hasn't played well so far, but from watching him play over the years, I continue to expect him to play well, and so hopefully they'll be able to look back at that trade and say we got 2 guys in that deal that helped us a lot over the last couple months of the season.
All right, time now for our Monday feature.
Well, it's a Monday. Thankfully, Jim is always our Friday. It's time for Mr. Eichenhofer to give his players of the week and a player to watch for this week. What you got, big guy?
Let's start with the player of the week. Now, obviously, the Pelicans only played 2 games, so this is a pretty small sample size, but I got to go with Zion Williamson. He averaged 25.5 points, 8 rebounds, only played 27.6 minutes per game, shot 59% from the field, also had total of 4 steals in the 2 games and then 2 blocks, so just continues to produce at a, I guess I would say, all NBA level of what he's been doing lately. If you took his numbers and you put them over the course of an entire season, I think he would be in consideration for that, and definitely would have been somebody that would have been a name that you saw as far as all-star possibilities. The player to watch over the next few games, Pelicans have 4 games this week. They play the Spurs Tuesday, then they start a road trip, 2 games in Phoenix on Thursday and Friday, Sunday at Utah. Player to watch, I'm going to go with Trey Murphy. Now, he's in a little bit of a shooting slump that's been uncharacteristic of the way he's played throughout the season. Over the last 3 games, he's 17 for 52 from the field, which is a little under 33%. He's 8 for 27 from three-point range, so I'm expecting him to turn things around. He hasn't had many stretches of more than a few games in his entire career where he hasn't shot well, so looking forward to be able to get the bump from him over these next few games. He's been starting as in the backcourt lately, so that's kind of mixed up some of the matchups that he's had to face defensively and change things a little bit. But as far as some of the players that he's going to go up against and might be matched up with, I mean, with the Spurs, you're talking about De'Aaron Fox and Devin Vassell, 2 guys that struggled Sunday night, as I mentioned earlier. Phoenix has Devin Booker and Kevin Durant. We might see Trey get matched up against them on either end of the floor, and then Utah with Lauri Markkanen on Sunday. So some interesting games that the Pelicans have coming up. Speaking of which, Gus, it's time for the spoiler scale.
I love the spoiler scale.
And we have an extended spoiler scale today because we're not going to have a show on next Monday due to Mardi Gras.
Okay.
So I'm going to cover the next couple weeks because I cannot miss an opportunity for the spoiler scale. So I don't want to miss next week's
You're thinking of the Tuesday game, aren't you?
Yes. Yes. You know me so well, Gus. So anyways, spoiler scale this week. For the game against the Spurs on Tuesday, I'm going to go with a 7 on that. Right now, the Spurs are 3.5 games out of 10th place in the Western Conference play-in race. So I think if you think about it realistically, this is a game the Spurs really need to win as far as staying in the hunt. I don't know if it's a huge priority or as much of a priority for them to make the play-in now that they don't have Wemby for the rest of the season. But either way, if they want to play meaningful games, I think they're looking at this like we cannot get swept in a 2-game baseball series in New Orleans. So 7 for that one on the spoiler scale. Thursday and Friday against Phoenix, I'm going with an 8 on that because I think we're starting to get a little bit of a code red for the Suns. They're 1.5 games behind Sacramento for 10th place. They're 27-30. They just had a really bad loss to Toronto yesterday. And I mean, the Suns it's been rough for them to even get any wins. Over this extended stretch lately, their only victories were they beat Utah in overtime and then they beat the Bulls on Saturday in a game that went down to the last minute or so. Bradley Beal made a huge basket to kind of put that one away against Chicago. Sunday night against Utah, I'm going with a 2 on the spoiler scale. I probably would have gone with a 1. I gave it an extra point, though, because I know people are still angry about them taking the Jazz nickname from
still
the city
angry, huh?
and leaving the city. So I talked to people that older gentlemen who went to games in the 70s, and they still mention that they don't appreciate the Utah taking the nickname. So I'll go with 2. And then next Tuesday, the game against the Lakers, I'm going with a 9, Gus, because I think there's a lot of reasons why the Pelicans have some animosity towards the Lakers. Maybe a little bit less because of a certain trade that happened that the former franchise player isn't with the Lakers anymore. But I'm going with a 9. Right now the Lakers are 34-21 and they're in 4th place in the West. It's going to be really interesting to see what happens with them over the rest of the season. I mean, they just had one of the most impressive victories of the season, I think, by winning at Denver on Saturday. If that's the Lakers that we're going to see, I think they have a chance to keep climbing up the standings. if the Lakers of losing to the Charlotte Hornets, if that's more of what we see in some of their other bad losses lately, it's going to be tough for them to, maintain their spot in the standings. But going with a 9 there. And then next week, next Thursday and Saturday, against the Pelicans play 2 games in a row against the Houston Rockets. I'm going with a 6 there. A little bit less because right now the Rockets are 35-22, 5th place in the West, but they're still pretty safe as far as finishing in the top 6. They're 4.5 games ahead of 7th place. So even though Houston's been in a bit of an extended slump here and struggling for a while, I still don't think they're really in a huge urgent situation. I don't know if there's really that much. Right now they're in 5th. I don't know if there's much difference between finishing 5th and 6th. That's the one spot in the standings where I don't know if it really matters that much in terms of how it affects you. You're going to be on the road to start a playoff series either way. So, but that's the spoiler scale. Quick review on the scale: Spurs 7, Suns 8, Utah 2, Lakers 9, Houston 6. That's the spoiler scale for this week.
There it is. I'm shocked you didn't give the Lakers a 10.
You know what? I want to leave a little extra.
I'm just
room.
curious now. What's a 10?
They play the Lakers later in the season, so I wanted to leave
a little.
I want to leave a little space there to go up from 9.
No, I understand.
If I went with a 10, we'd have to go to 11 on that one. So because they play them, I think it's in March again. So yeah, I think I'm gonna reserve the 10s for a dire situation for the other team where it's almost like we have to win this game or the season's over kind of deal.
I understand it. And there's the explanation we all agree. There it is. I love it. Wednesday, we're going to try to get you Carlo Matkovic. Hopefully we can get that interview for you as part of the podcast on Wednesday. And we'll also talk about the second meeting against the Spurs in as many days, essentially. 2 games in 3 days. So that game is tomorrow, 7 o'clock at the Smoothie King Center. Again, Pelicans.com. Jim will have his preview, and then after the game, he'll have some stuff here as well, and then we'll see you back here on Wednesday. Thank you, Jim.
Thanks, Gus. And by the way, programming note, we will not have a podcast on Friday this week as we get ready for Mardi Gras. We still will be on the air, though, with the Friday. You'll be talking radio. I'm definitely going to be in the studio for one of those games, Thursday or Friday, so you won't be able to get away from me completely. But yeah, no episode Friday, but we'll be here Wednesday. We'll be here Wednesday this week.
Sounds good. All right, thank you as always for tuning us in and following your Pelicans on the New Orleans Pelicans Podcast.
Thanks for listening to the New Orleans Pelicans Podcast. Join us 3 times per week on Pelicans.com, the Pelicans mobile app, the iHeartRadio app, or where you get your podcasts. And be sure to give Jim and Gus a follow on X at Jim_Eichenhofer and GCat_17. We'll see you next time, right here on the New Orleans Pelicans Podcast.